And it's just this weird micro economy in Utah around like taking the words of the prophet and just putting them into that live, laugh,
monetizing them. Yeah.
Yeah. And then slapping it on mugs and pillows.
Mommy's got to make this. Get out of here.
High control environment where shame and fear are wielded as tools to keep everyone in line.
Biggest fear I had was playing volleyball against the Samoan elders.
Libraries enforce a regime of unnatural silence.
We almost landed our own rule in the White Handbook. That was fun.
Really? Felt like Wesley in the pit of despair, watching my life just get sucked out of my body. Welcome back to Salty Saints. My name is Hayden Holm. This is my brother Tanner. And today we're going to be talking about Etsy shop conference profiteering. The MTC. Is it really a brainwashing center? We've got some MTC Mission Stories, as well as some questions we'll be covering in Doctrine and Covenants. All that and more on Salty Saints. And now for a cultural call-out. We sure Alright, so for today's cultural call-out, we'll be talking about Etsy shop conference profiteering. I don't know if this is something that you've noticed, but let me start off with a story. It was conference weekend. We were really excited. We had a great conference. And immediately after, we started hanging out with some of our friends who were also members of the church. And we started talking to them about conference. And the first thing that one of these gals said was, I was so bummed. And we're like, oh no, what happened? She was like, well, this was the conference where President Nelson gave off the proclamation of the Book of Mormon. And she was just like, I had this thought hit me right after conference of like, oh my gosh, I could make this into this big illustrated poster that I could then sell on an Etsy shop. But when I looked on Etsy, there were already about like 3 or 4 others that had already sold about like 11 or 12,000 copies. And so I was just really disappointed about that. And to me, I don't know, my mind just blew. I was just like, what in the world is going on? Apparently, like there's this behind the scenes market that's just forming, and they're trying to make money off of having their products first to market. Is this something that you've seen as well, or am I just crazy over here?
Oh yeah, I've seen it because I like to, sometimes I like to right after conference or something, jump on Twitter, or X, and Facebook and just see what, some of my friends, their takes on things. And almost immediately I get targeted ads for Etsy shops with like the latest thing that President Nelson said, the latest catchphrase or whatever that came out of his talk, right? And it's just this weird like micro economy in Utah around like taking the words of the prophet and just putting them into that live, laugh,
monetizing them.
Yeah. And then slapping it on mugs and pillows. You just like, you get it out the door as fast as possible. And then people who watch the talk think, oh, I need that in my home somewhere. And then they go to Etsy and they buy it. So like, I like on its face, it's not like, it just, there's something icky about it. Like it gives me the ick for sure. Like it's just,
and that's what we want to explore. So why
does it give me the ick?
Why do we have the ick about this?
And it feels like you're not watching conference for like the actual spiritual message. You're just waiting for the latest hook to drop. So you can be like, oh, that's my branding this part of the year, this 6 months. And then you're just taking that and you're running with it. Right. So, everyone's got their laptops out, they're on Canva, they're just waiting for President Nelson to say something that sinks in, that's impactful. And then bam, that's for sale. So I don't feel like you're fully grasping the message, if you're just waiting for, if you're half your annual profit, from your Etsy shop relies on what happens that weekend. That's right. Maybe you shouldn't be working that time if you can avoid it. I don't know. It's weird.
I tell you, I think it was the Think Celestial talk. Like, I think it was like the day after. I don't even think conference was done yet, but like the day after, I started seeing on social media pictures of men and women that were photoshopped, styled, and ready to go, of them wearing like sweatshirts that said Think Celestial and t-shirts and all of that. And I'm just like, I feel like we've fallen a little bit as a society too hard into materialism. Like, why is
not a celestial trait, by the way? Consumerism is not celestial. So the irony is like, I took this Think Celestial slogan and I just terrestrialized it really hardcore. It just really bothers me when I see that. You're not thinking celestial if you're profiting off of that.
So the people that made the Think Celestial t-shirts maybe were thinking a little bit telestial on that. Is that what you're saying? Well, I mean,
that's kind of
far from you to call a spade, but okay.
There's that classic meme that goes around of that guy just saying, "How can I make money off of this?" You know, and if you're watching conference and thinking like, "How can I make money off of conference?"
Yeah,
maybe you should just rethink why you're watching conference. Maybe just listen. They'll probably tell you something that might hit you a little harder than your bank account there.
Well, have you ever seen that meme? Because like a lot of ex-Mormons and anti-Mormons often claim that members of the church don't really listen to conference. There's this meme shows a family listening to conference and they're all asleep on the couch. And then it shows ex-members and anti-members watching conference and they're all like out there with their notepads and they're listening to every word. So I think this group of saints, the profiteering Etsy shop saints, are now categorized in that group that's actually paying attention. So I think we can clap back against the ex-Mos this time and say, wait a minute, we do have some more members that maybe are paying attention. I don't know if I agree with the reason why they're doing it, but I think they are paying some attention.
Well, that's Traxton's third boat depends on them paying attention during conference, because they got to pay for that boat payment with whatever Etsy shop money they're going to make that spring. So yeah, they're paying very close attention because they're waiting. And kudos to President Nelson and some of the other speakers because they have some bangers. Think celestial is a great phrase. It's a great one to kind of let sink into your mind and use as a mantra. Yeah. And unfortunately, we take that and we ruin it because we can't have nice things. Apparently, that's what we've learned from Etsy and Mormonism merging on this terrible point.
If these members were in the time of the Savior, I imagine the Savior giving his big Sermon on the Mount, and then these members are like needleworking their hands off, just creating like this little hoop embroidery that said like, "Blessed are the meek," or something like that. And then they just like pass it out. They start selling it at the end. They're just like, "Hurry up, hurry. He's almost done. We got to be first to market," and they completely miss the mark.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to the value.
They're the ones selling the palm fronds or, the plates holding the loaves and fishes. It's like, stop doing that. You're taking a good thing and you're ruining it. So,
well, and it's not necessarily that the product that I disagree with. So like I'm not saying that you can't have big, nice, fancy things. My problem is the timing of it. Because that's where the ick comes for me is when I see like before conference has ended, before it's in the ground, people are creating these products and just flooding the market with it because that shows like this hyper competitive kind of a very telestial mindset about the words of the prophets. So I would say maybe let those same words that you're using to sell, let those sink in and see how much value you can get out of them internally before you then try and externally create value off of those words.
Yeah, give it some time, process it a little bit.
I think Laman and Lemuel would serve a great parallel. So they were surrounded by multiple prophets, and they had the words of these prophets spoken to them repeatedly. And had they just applied those words into their lives and changed their hearts, let them impact their natures, then it could have transformed their miserable, awful, sorrowful sojourn and toil and journey through the wilderness and on the sea into something great and beautiful and happy. Similar to like the brother of Jared, where those guys were literally singing praises as they were being buried by the sea. That's kind of the same attitude, the same underlying mentality that I see here, is that they're sitting at the feet of these prophets, but they do not understand because they do not wish to understand.
And that was a sweet Prince of Egypt.
Yeah, thought I could just sneak that in there, yeah.
Yeah, and I, like you said, it's all about the timing because people obviously want to buy these products. I mean, and I'm sure that it doesn't hurt to have things like Think Celestial in your home, right? Or on your shirt. Yeah. Those are a benefit to you, So there's a demand, there's a market for it. There's nothing like inherently immoral about that. The ick, and it's almost exclusively just an icky feeling about this, is the fact that it comes like before the prophet's even done saying the words,
Yeah.
Like I don't know how they do it so fast, but like you said, they're obviously not paying attention, or they can't afford to pay attention because they have to get their product out super quick. So,
well, just imagine like that process, right? So just imagine what that process looks like. So that to me, if you're like a young mom and you're doing this, You probably have some kids that are floating around you, and you're probably telling them to be quiet. You're probably not being engaged with the kids. You're probably trying to listen to conference as well, and you're probably just like on your laptop. So you got like 4 or 5 things going on. And you're probably listening to this thinking like, mommy's got to make this. Get out of here. I don't want you. Come on. No, I got to put it on some products, and now I got to get this formatted. All right, let's put it in the shop and let's get it out. Hurry, hurry, hurry. You know, it's like, it's probably a hyper stressed mode that they're living in. And so the takeaway, what is the takeaway in the age of home-centered church? The quote that comes to my mind is that classic quote. And I heard it all the time in the MTC. How can I hear what you say when what you do rings so loudly in my ears? While you may be listening to conference and watching conference, I think it may be worth stepping back and realizing that your children are watching you, and they're looking at what you're doing and your attitude that you're bringing towards conference and you're bringing towards the words of the prophets. And if you are only trying to listen to these words so you can get some kind of external monetary value out of them, your children are going to grow up in the church of religious consumerism and not in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And then that's what you get, you know, like the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. Mm-hmm. I feel like a lot of those gals were brought up in the church of religious consumerism. Like everything about it's hyper materialistic from all of the trailers, all of the talk. I know you've watched a couple of episodes. Why don't you tell me?
No, I mean, there's this whole like cultural version of Mormonism, right? Which we're well aware of, that people claim to be a part of. But they don't actually ascribe to any of the actual gospel principles. So, which leaves us in a very bizarre situation. So your kids will have to choose between that. You know, a lot of people that I've grown up with who have now fallen away from the church only saw that. You know, they only saw the cultural side of things. They didn't understand that there's a deeper spiritual motive between going to church and, you know, reading your scriptures. They thought that was just like something you do to fit in, right?
Right.
Yeah, and you know, it to me, just aside as a tangential note here, it part of this icky feeling that you get when profiting off the prophet's words, you know, it's very like you have like the spirit that you feel when you go into the chapel in church on Sunday, when you go to the chapel on Sunday, and then you have the spirit that you feel when you walk into a Deseret book. You know, it's calm, there's beautiful music, you feel a sense of peace, and then you start seeing the price tags everywhere. You're like, oh, this doesn't feel super neat. Yeah. Do I have to pay money to feel this way? Because that's awkward, you know? Like, it's kind of a gross feeling. So I have similar icks about Deseret book and kind of the spirit for sale kind
that's
of.
That's a good parallel. Yeah. No, like So
do you want to go to church at Deseret book, or do you want to go to the actual chapel?
And so for that reason, we call the culture to step up a little bit. And now it's time to consider the path of your feet, for crying out loud. Today, we are considering the path of a very confused young man. Let's turn it over to this gentleman who seems to be broadcasting from inside a storage closet at a dental office and see what he has to say.
Missionary training centers, or MTC, might just be one of the most cult-like environments on Earth. Inside, young men and women are bombarded with religious indoctrination from morning till night. Isolated from the outside world, no leaving, few phone calls, and only the occasional email. Criticism? Not tolerated. It's a high-control environment where shame and fear are wielded as tools to keep everyone in line. Missionaries are denied any personal time, constantly under surveillance, with the exception of a few moments alone in the bathroom. Far from being nurturing or supportive, the MTC is designed to strip away critical thinking, personal freedoms, and one's entire identity.
He had some really awesome upbeat music. It was like some angry music that you would hear maybe from like a Russian techno party or something like that. You know, it had all the angry vibes. And then he showed this completely furious phase of Elder Gong, which if you're going to show an apostle that when you're saying like they rule by fear and shame, like you should have showed Holland of any of them.
Or Oaks.
Or Oaks, yeah. I mean, those are the two that can strike fear into anybody. But like Elder Gong, he is like super chill, really even keeled, really nice. Anyway, what are some of your initial reactions?
First of all, his chair does look like a dental chair. I will give you that. I did notice that at the very beginning. So maybe, two birds, one stone, get your cavities filled and hate the church at the same time. Cool.
Well, if there is one thing that you see on every corner in Utah, it is an LDS chapel, and right next to it, it's a dentist's office. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, the odds play out in favor of this one. So, no, I think that some of the things that like were funny to me is that he says that they're kept in isolation, and then he shows Provo, the MTC smack dab in the middle of Provo.
Yeah,
you can go running around Provo, but it's what you agreed to do is to come to these buildings and learn. And you actually have to fill out a quite rigorous application to become a missionary. So if you're not consenting throughout the entire process, it's kind of a you problem.
So wait. Are you telling me that parents aren't grabbing their kids and throwing them into the MTC against their will, saying like, "Mom, no, please, let me stay home.
Kicking and screaming.
I don't want to do this."
Yeah, I mean, and so sure, like your parents really want you to go. There's some pressure there. Yeah, but you still have to choose to do it. Like this whole whiny mentality of like, I never had a choice, because you never had a spine. You need to have a spine to make choices, and you can't just like blame the world for you being spineless. If you don't want to go on a mission, don't go on a mission. If you want to, but you're not sure, if you want to go on a mission, then great. That's a great place to start. And if you want to go on a mission and you believe and you have a testimony, perfect. Go to the MTC. They'll teach you everything you need to know. They'll feed you. They'll give you everything you need so you don't have to leave the campus. It's actually a pretty sweet deal. I had a great time at the MTC. It was a fun time. It went a little long, but that's because French is hard. It was hard to pick up for me. People who try to paint the MTC as this indoctrination camp. First of all, newsflash, your info is messed up. They're already indoctrinated by your standards by the time they get to the MTC.
He did say they're being brainwashed. It's like, no, if they were brainwashed, it has already happened at that point.
Those brains are squeaky clean by the time they get to the MTC, let me tell you. So if that's the argument, it doesn't work, because that's not what it's there for. It's there to teach you a language, and it's there to teach you how to teach. They do both of those things very well at the MTC. There are different programs around the world that come to study how language is taught at the MTC because they do such a proficient job. The MTC is a great place to bolster your spirit. You can feel strength and unity and solidarity with those people who believe the same thing you do. And every time somebody sees everyone enjoying the same belief system, it just automatically appears to be a cult for some reason.
Well, I think it's important to call out the language. So MTC, what does that stand for? Missionary Training Center. So it's a place for training. That's right. This guy seems to believe that MTC stood for Missionary Tickle Center. It's like a big Montessori school with a bunch of dye-free toys and free-range teenagers that could just go and do whatever they want as they eat their organic applesauce pouches and do finger painting all day. I'm not sure what his idea was. This is like boot camp for your mission. So I think this is a good question to explore. What do you think your mission would have been like without an MTC experience?
For starters, I wouldn't have spoken French. Like, it just wouldn't have happened,
Right.
Like, and I learned most of my French on my mission, but those initial 6 weeks is like, oh, I need to get this in gear.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was really, helpful because it helps you set expectations for what teaching actually looks like in the field. I never had a lesson go actually as we role played it in the MTC. It's never going to resemble what you do there exactly, but the practice and the repetition and the faith building that happens in the MTC is the most important part. It provides a filtration system for those elders who thought that they were ready and realize that they're not, which is great. It gives them a chance to fix things before they get actually out into the mission field. And it gives you a chance to address questions that you might not have asked yet about the gospel. If you missed a gospel principle growing up that you weren't feeling super strong about, you could pray and learn about it in the MTC, which was amazing. So I feel like on the other hand too, not a lot of people had a lot of experience just bearing their testimonies, just saying what they believe. And that happens all the time in the MTC. So I think that, all those things need to happen. You need to practice all of those things before you actually get out in front of a real family who's asking you what happens when we die. Or where did we come from before this life? You need to be well rehearsed in those before you get in front of them, so you can actually be an effective teacher. You're not gonna do a good job unless you practice. And what better place to do it than the MTC?
I don't know if it's different from when I was there. It probably is, but when I was there, like the average day we didn't actually have that much time of instruction. Like there wasn't actually that much time where other people came and taught us and teachers came in. Obviously, like we did have like maybe 2, I think 3 hours a day where somebody would come in, they would teach us Spanish. Somebody else would come in and they would teach us about, gospel principles, and they would teach us about testifying and all of that. And then somebody else would come in and teach us about like role playing and how to teach and how to train and all of that. But the rest of the time was literally just sitting in a quiet room studying the gospel. It was actually a learning center where we were reading scriptures, we were studying the language, and we were trying to figure it all out, which happens pretty much autonomously. Because like you didn't have to just be limited to your room. You could study wherever you wanted to. But he made it sound like this was like a prison and you were being watched by prison guards 24/7 with these big binoculars. And as soon as you stepped out of line, there were heavy consequences leveraged on you. He talked about fear and guilt and shame being wielded as weapons. What do you think was being wielded at the MTC? Some of the things that I can think of: the BYU Creamery orange juice. That was wielded. That was just, it sounded like Civil War cannons going off every single night. I don't know what they put in that orange juice, but everyone knew to stay away from it.
It was a bioweapon. Yeah, for sure. It was experimentation. If forget the indoctrination stuff. This is experimentation upon humans. That stuff is gnarly.
Yeah.
Why we kept drinking it, I don't know. Like everyone just kept like it was almost like a dare, like, hey, can you survive the orange juice? Like, oh, I guess not.
The chocolate milk,
all
of the food that was wielded to the chagrin of my waistband. Like, I think I fatted out of like 2 pairs of pants at the MTC. What about you? What was being wielded in your experience?
I think the biggest fear I had was playing volleyball against the Samoan elders.
Oh.
That one, I did that once. And I was
Talk about fear, guilt, and shame. Yeah, there it is. We found it.
I don't know. I knew very little about Polynesian culture, but apparently the losing team sacrifices their life after that. Like it's a to the death thing with volleyball. Yeah. So I that was wielded against me. If you want to think of something that might put you in harm, like there's some competitive elders out there for sure.
I think of like the scripture markers with the flash camera to make lightsabers, or like the ironing boards that were bolted into the wall. Those were wielded to make really cool matrix photos, like slow motion. Yeah, you remember those?
The pull-up contests, the push-up contests, there's not much recreation that happens, but I think that's intentional because you need to focus, right?
Yeah.
But another huge benefit of it is that you watch elders and they learn how to manage their own diet for once, or not manage it.
Yeah.
Or they learn how to wash their own clothes for once. There's some critical things that, people need to check on you first before you go out into the real world. Like, hey, can you do this? Can you do this basic thing, like wash your own clothes and not eat yourself to death? Because we need to be able to manage that.
Right.
So I feel like those are some more temporal things that the missionary training center trains you on that people don't realize. So
yeah.
Overall, I give it a 9 out of 10 in terms of experience. I thought it was a great time.
What are some of the greatest things that you took away from the MTC? Some of the greatest lessons that you learned? I'll start off. So for me, I think it was figuring out how to plan my day effectively, because every day you had that little pocket planner and you were supposed to plan out everything that you're doing down to the hour. That is something that I still use to this day. The other thing is goal setting. Even though the goals didn't really make sense in the MTC, they were all kind of fictional goals, it actually helped you get ready for the mission, because the mission is all about goals. Every single day you're setting goals in the mission, but that helps you after the mission to continue setting goals to improve your life. I think the third most valuable for me was just being held to a regular schedule. So the idea of this routine, and it was a self-imposed routine. In the MTC, there was a little bit more pressure to stay with the routine because you have so many other districts and you're living in close quarters, so everyone sees what you're doing. But on the mission, you really hold yourself to that routine. So they train it into you in the MTC, and then you are responsible for keeping it up on the mission. But that is something if you can keep up a basic routine, planning and goal setting, you're setting your future self up for a life of success, because there's nothing that can get in your way that you can't tackle at that point. But what about you?
100%.
What are some of the big lessons for you?
the most valuable thing I pulled from the MTC was the ability to just focus on a singular topic like the gospel and just dive deep. Before that, like I would read my scriptures and it was regular, it was pretty surface level a lot of the time, like enough to build a testimony, but or a resemblance of a testimony. But having the time to actually just focus for days, and weeks on this thing that I'm going to teach people and this thing that I believe, helped me develop a love for the gospel that I didn't have before. Yeah. Right. So having that time to just like without any distraction, which is such a benefit, such a plus. And that's funny that, a lot of people see that and they think isolation, but no, it's focus, it's solitude. It's extremely beneficial to just take that time and to focus on nothing else but the gospel. So that was the biggest thing that I took away from the
especially
MTC.
For us, because we were in this generation where smartphones weren't really a thing when we came out, but we did have phones. And so phones still were a big distraction for us. We were completely disconnected from those phones, and we had to learn how to focus on something at hand. I love that. Like the ability to study, that's something that I took away from the MTC as well. I didn't know how to study in school. I was one of those kids that would do homework in front of the TV and think that I could do both really well, but it ended up just ruining both. Like I wasn't enjoying the TV show and I did really poorly on my homework, but the MTC showed me if you want to do something well, you need silence, you need to focus, and you need to study. And that was kind of an eye-opener for me. There's a study, it was done by Positive Psychology. It said, studies show that establishing a routine, engaging in training, setting goals, and planning can significantly benefit teenagers by improving their academic performance, boosting self-confidence, enhancing time management skills, promoting mental well-being, and developing resilience in the face of challenges. Wow. That's pretty much everything that the MTC encapsulates. And look at all of those benefits that come from it. And then you just contrast that with getting ready for the mission. So they're basically helping you boost your confidence, boost your self-esteem, give you these tools that you can use on a mission when you're going to go face some really hard things so that you can have mental resilience. Because without those tools, you're going to be toast on your mission. Like if I didn't have the MTC on my mission, culture shock would have been way, way worse, first of all, because I did not study Spanish before my mission. I had no idea how to speak Spanish, so that would have taken me much, much longer to learn. But also, just the idea of the plan, the schedule, goal setting, teaching, all of that would have had to come by hard-learned experience, and the people that would have taught me those lessons would probably be much less forgiving than the very soft-spoken, gracious teachers at the MTC. There was this great Greek poet. I think his name is Archilochus. He says, "We don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training." And I think that really drives home the point of the MTC. It reminds me of, I'm reading a book called Band of Brothers, and fantastic book. It talks about this highly specialized group of volunteers. I think it was like one of the first paratrooping units in the United States military. And it shows how they had to enter boot camp, and their group, Easy Company, had the most difficult and challenging boot camp of anyone else in the Army. Like they would have to run up and down this mountain called Currahee multiple times a day. And they had this rigorous training schedule. They had Captain Sobel, who was just like this manipulative, micromanaging guy who made sure he critiqued every aspect of their life. He made sure everything was clean, everything was orderly. And one time he fed them a bunch of spaghetti, and then he had them run up and down Currahee, which was 6 miles, and men were like puking the whole way out, And so the thing is, these men got used to physical exhaustion. They got used to being in freezing cold temperatures. They got used to being uncomfortable, and they became more familiar with their training than any other unit out there, so that their training became their default intuition, so that when they were in the chaos of battle, everything that they needed to do was second nature to them. They didn't have to think about it. They weren't frozen. They weren't scared. It was just like, okay, I've been through this before. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. That's what the MTC does for you. It starts that training, and it helps you learn. This is how to have like a basic conversation. You're trying to teach somebody. You're going on a cold contact. It gives you some training that you can fall back on so that it becomes second nature to you to teach and preach the gospel. As a final wrap up, there's this quote by Elder Holland that I really wanted to read. It says, "Missionary work is not easy because salvation is not a cheap experience. Salvation never was easy. We are the Church of Jesus Christ. This is the truth, and he is our great eternal head. How could we believe it would be easy for us when it was never easy for him?" So missionary work is going to be difficult. It reminds me of that song, like, "You're in the Army, Mr. Jones." You know, that song, it's got some great one-liners, all right? I mean, this is the Army, Mr. Jones. No private rooms or telephones. You had your breakfast in bed before, but you won't have it there anymore.
Yeah.
Like this guy, he thought he was signing up for the Hilton. You know, it's like, no, you have to go through something difficult that tries you and gets you ready to face a very, very difficult experience, which is the mission, which then sets you up for an incredibly difficult experience, which is life.
Well, I think that just because it's hard, there's this like idea that difficult things or rigorous things are evil, right? I feel like there's the shadow term for that is high control. Like, no, they expect more of you, right? You have to do things on a higher level and with more discipline than you did before, but it's still up to you, right?
Yeah.
So I think that you can look at it and you can be bitter about it and say, I was caught in a high control, my freedom was restricted. These things were terrible that happened to me. Or you can look at it and say, I rose to a challenge. I tried something that was harder than I'd ever tried before, and it molded me into something better. I think that's what you need to take it. For missionaries who are going to the MTC, get ready. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be super fun. And you're going to learn how to catapult into your mission in a way that you couldn't if you didn't have the MTC. So I think it's overall a very positive experience as long as you take the right approach.
This guy's attitude is leading him down a path of entitlement. It's leading him down that comfortable path that says, like, if there is anything demanded or required or expected of me, that is in some way, shape, or form some kind of trauma or some kind of high control, and someone's trying to get one over on me. And it leads to a very whiny and entitled, very weak place. For that reason, we call him to consider the path of your feet.
And now it's time to be of good cheer, for heaven's sakes.
All right, so we're going to take our own shot at creating a PSA for another high-control, cult-like religion that many people may not know about or even realize. It poses as a nice, safe, public amenity. But deep down inside, everyone knows the cult-like aspects of the public library.
A maze of entrapment. Walk into a public library and you'll soon find yourself lost in an endless labyrinth of shelves designed to keep you wandering forever, clutching books you never intended to read, questioning reality itself.
Libraries enforce a regime of unnatural silence, suppressing natural human expression. Whisper too loud? A librarian's glare freezes you in place, reminding you that your voice does not matter here.
Mind control via books. Books are filled with ideas, carefully curated by unseen forces to manipulate your worldview. Who chooses these books? Why do they want you to read them? Can you even trust the alphabet anymore?
They claim you can borrow books for free, but the moment you are a day late, they slap you with fines, a financial chokehold ensuring compliance. Who really benefits? Certainly not you.
Surveillance by librarians. Every book you check out is recorded. Every search on public computers is monitored. These so-called friendly librarians know exactly what you're thinking. You thought Google was bad? Try staring into the cold, knowing eyes of Miss Thompson at the front desk.
Ever noticed how librarians always lure kids in with story time? It's a gateway to indoctrination. They claim it's about literacy, but really, it's about conditioning young minds to obey, to sit still and listen, and accept whatever words are spoon-fed to them.
A playground for germs and disease. Thousands of hands touch those books. They linger in the air, soaking up sneezes, coughs, and who knows what from toddler sticky fingers. That free knowledge, yeah, that comes with bacteria too. If you thought the MTC was malicious, and what we've seen from this previous video is that you can take any harmless thing and make it sound as malicious as possible by using different words and techno-Russian music in the background and, editing skills. So if you thought that was bad, just you wait until you see the public library, because it is 100 times worse, apparently.
And now, Tales from the Mission.
This one happened, well, I think I was like 3 or 4 weeks into the MTC. I was a sickly child. I don't know what happened, but I got probably sicker than I had ever been in my entire life. maybe the fear and the guilt and the shame, maybe they were wielding sickness too. It was bio warfare to get me to obey. Yeah, but I was super sick. I didn't know what was going on. I had a super bad fever. I had one of the worst sore throats I'd ever had in my whole life. Like, my whole body would cringe every time I would swallow. It was so bad. We get sent to the nurse's office. In this chair, the nurse comes in. She's like, "Hi." And so I'm just like sitting there, like half dead. And she's just like, "So what's wrong?" I'm like, "I don't really know." And she's like, "Okay, well, let me draw some blood real quick." And I was like, "Okay, thanks." I'm not like an anti-needle guy. Like, I can handle needles. But for me, when they fish around, when they play like Where's Waldo with my veins, that's when I get a little bit uncomfortable with needles. So I'm like, okay, yeah, go for it. So I give her my left arm. I'm like, go for it. She sticks me with the needle, and then she starts trying to find Waldo. And I'm just like, oh. And I start squirming. I'm just like, "Ooh." And she's like, "You just have such thick skin." I was like, "Oh, I'm writing someone."
That's not skin.
And so then she pulled out the needle. She's like, "Well, let me try again." She sticks it back in. Can't find any blood, so she just needles it around even more. And I'm just like dying at this point. I'm just like, please, I'll tell you anything you want to know. I'll tell you where the Jericho missiles are. Just let me out of here. And she pulls it out. And she's like, "Well, shoot, I just can't get it on that vein. And I am one of the best nurses here. Like, I'm usually the one they call to get blood." And I'm like, "You're not helping yourself, lady." So she's like, "Let's try the other arm." So she goes for my other arm. And she goes, hits it, and nothing happens. Again, she starts fishing around. And I'm just like, I keep squirming in my chair. My face is like completely just straight. I'm just like completely pale at this point. I'm dying. I'm feverish. I'm just like, ow! She takes it out. She does it again. And I'm just dying even more. She takes it out again. She's just like, "This has never happened to me before. I don't know what's going on." And I was like, "Oh, I'm really sorry for you. That sounds like a rough day." And she's just like, "Okay, well, let's try the forearms now." So she grabs my left forearm. She sticks me with the forearm. Can't find the freaking vein. And so she does that twice on my left arm, twice on my right arm. She's fishing both times. And it is super painful. And she's just like, "Okay, let me try your wrists." So she goes for my wrists. Twice on my left wrist, twice on my right wrist. And I am like just dying at this point. I'm just like, I felt like Wesley in the pit of despair, watching my life just get sucked out of my body as I'm watching her fish for these veins. And then at the very end, she's like, "Okay, I don't think I've ever done this before, but I'm going to try and take it from the top of your hand. This one's going to be a little bit painful." And I was just like, "Just do your worst." So she grabs my hand. She just puts the needle right into a vein at the top of my hand. It did hurt like the dickens, but she got the blood. It took like freaking 5 minutes to fill up that vial from the top of my hand. She got it. I got wrapped up for the day, and then I got sent back to my bed. And after being super sick, I thought my life was miserable, but then I realized afterwards, I'm like, being sick isn't that bad, because at least I'm not getting poked. I'm not getting poked like a pincushion over here while I'm being sick at the same time. So it made me appreciate my experience a little bit more after that.
Yeah, there's a time where my friend and we almost landed our own rule in the White Handbook. So that was fun.
Really?
Yeah, it was fun. He got called up to the mission president's office, and I got a letter from the mission president after. So my buddy, he was going to a different mission. So he was in a different building on the other side of campus there.
Yeah.
And we still wanted to talk. We had entered the mission, the MTC at the same time. So what we would do is we knew we had points of contact. We knew that there's the mail office, and then there was the cafeteria, and then there's the laundry center, right? And so we would write notes in very cryptic language and symbols and things like that with the codes that only we had, and we'd slip them in these little crevices and things like that.
Yeah.
I think my favorite one was these giant portraits of the modern prophets right in front of the cafeteria.
Yeah.
And what you don't notice is that they're hanging on a string, but that means that the top of the portrait is hanging off the wall and they're leaning against the wall like this at the bottom.
Right.
So you could easily slip an envelope with a letter in it against, like, behind the portrait, and the other guy can walk when he goes to lunch. He can walk behind it, just pull the portrait off the wall, and it'll slip right into his hand, and he can just scoot right on into the cafeteria and read his letter from his friend. So obviously we were struggling with the singular focus of the MTC and studying the gospel all the time.
Yeah.
So we had to vent our creativity in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a couple of these notes around, and then we ended up using a Pringles can at one point, and we'd leave it in the cafeteria and have some change in it, have different things in it, all written in some weird symbology and things, because we didn't want other people to write it. One of the janitors was cleaning out the cafeteria and found it, and was deeply disturbed for some reason by all the cryptic writing,
the Pringles,
the symbols, and things like that. And he took it to the mission president because he felt like it was threatening for some reason.
Yeah.
And so the mission president called my buddy up to the mission, up to his office, and says, "What is this? What is this?" Because I slipped up, and in somewhere in the notebook and the letters that we were sharing with each other, I had written his name at one point.
Oof.
And so that was the only way they read through the entire thing, and that was the only way they found out, is because one time I used his name instead of the cryptic code names we had.
So they had all of your notes at this point.
They had everything. Yeah, they intercepted everything. We had to go dark after that. Yeah. So just like in Mission Impossible, no one came to save us. We were disavowed. Yeah. But my buddy went up to the mission president's office, and mission president was like, he was more like confused than anything. He's like, "Why did you do this?" He's like, "I don't know. I was just talking to my friend." He's like, "You miss your friend? You went through all this. Do you want to talk to him? Should we go get him right now? You can just go talk to him. If you miss him, call him. I don't know. Stop writing notes and leaving them everywhere.
You're freaking out the janitors."
Yeah, and he told my buddy, like, I don't want to have to put another rule in the handbook. So can you just not leave notes everywhere and just go and talk to your friend when you miss him? And my buddy's like, "Okay, we'll do that." So I got a letter from the MTC president there. He said, "Yeah, if you miss your buddy, go talk to him, please. Don't leave notes everywhere. That's not appropriate for the MTC." And so I feel like that was a great way to end my time, because I was like towards the last week that I was there, to just feel like, okay, yeah, we almost did it. We almost found a new way to break the MTC president and get us another rule.
Get a rule. You almost had one.
Yeah, but it was a fun, creative time. I maybe there's some new spots that the elders can find to pass notes to each other, but that was my hobby in the MTC. Everyone has their little hobbies. Some's drawing, is drawing Superman S's on the back of their notebooks. Other people hide notes, swapping missionary tags with elders not knowing. That was a fun one too.
Yeah.
So if you hug people and you go, little sleight of hand, you can grab their MTC tag and then you give them another hug, because apparently you can just hug everybody as much as you want in the MTC.
Yeah.
And then you can just, swap their name tags. They won't notice for a day or two. It's pretty fun.
There you go. Yeah. Well, that is crazy. Just because you forgot to put the Pac-Man symbol and the sunglasses smiley face symbol for his name, they found you. So, what do you think would have happened if they didn't connect you to that other elder? Do you think they would have just been like, "We've got the next Unabomber on our hands"?
They said that this is a significant issue, because they felt like that there were some very nefarious messages being passed in between, and they could lead to something dangerous. I mean, I wouldn't dare say that they thought it was going to be a bombing or anything like that.
Right.
But they were very peeved at the whole thing. Like, they're like, "Do not pass secret notes like that. That's very disturbing, and we can't have our janitorial staff being freaked out that there's a Pringles can bomb in the cafeteria."
Right.
We can't do that. So yeah, it was a fun time. I still have all those notes. He gave them back. So I still have all the communications between me and this other elder, which was fun to keep.
Oh, that is fun. So are you telling me that they didn't filter out all your communication with him? They were just like, "Go talk to him." They didn't try and control your communication. They're just like, "You miss him, go talk to him. He's right over there. Just go talk to him."
That's what made me laugh about our previous segment about, the MTC being this high control surveillance state. As soon as they knew that I wanted to go talk to him, they're like, "Why don't you just go talk to him? Just take a minute and go over there and say hi. If you're friends, stop doing this elaborate crap. Just be human." I feel like 99% of the issues that people have with things like the MTC are just their own personal assumptions of how things should work.
And now it's time for This Week in Come Follow Me.
All right, so this week in Come Follow Me, we're reading in Doctrine and Covenants 10, and there's a specific verse that I wanted to focus on. It's verse 47, and it says, I said unto them that it should be granted unto them according to their faith in their prayers. Now, that's a really interesting phrase for me, because typically you hear like, oh, according to their faith and according to their desires. However, this is an instance where you're saying according to their faith, specifically in their communication with God, which is a fascinating call out. I don't know if you felt this way before, but sometimes when you pray, it seems like if you're just going through the motions, that the prayer is probably going to go up to some kind of a filtering system that gets sent up like 4 or 5 letters of bureaucracy. It ends up on like maybe somebody's desk, and they're like, this isn't worthy of his attention, and then they just throw it into this big like spam filtering bin, of like, oh, this is just another spam prayer, put it over there. Sometimes I get into that mode, and when I read something like this, it gives me a little bit of pause, because it's saying, wait a second, maybe you should think a little bit more about the words that you're using in your prayer. And it seems like if you are putting more weight into what you're actually saying, then there's going to be more power that you can draw down from heaven because of that. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think that there's a really key mechanism there that we need to focus on for a second, which is do you believe that you can talk to your Heavenly Father? You have to have faith in that process. If you don't, then you're just sending mental thoughts into the ether, Right. And so I think that, that principle of we believe, and we say this all the time, that there's a loving Heavenly Father there who listens to our prayers, but that also means that when you speak, your voice carries to him. And you have to have faith in that. You have to believe that that's actually how it works. And the ramifications of that belief is that you should be careful about how you speak, because you're speaking to Heavenly Father, right? Right. So you should be considerate and precise in your language when you do pray, rather than just rambling. Because I always try to imagine a conversation being had between me and God. And some of the times I just say stuff really fast and mumble it, mentally in my head when I pray. And if that was an actual conversation, he's like, man, what are you, autistic?
Come on, you could do better than that. Come on.
You can do better than that, for sure. Like, you can stand up straight, speak clearly, mean what you say and say what you mean, What comes to mind is the Horton hears a who for some reason. Yeah. The fact that all the who's in Whoville can't be heard until every single one of them is, speaking their loudest and trying their hardest. And once that smallest who actually opens up and starts speaking, then Horton can hear them. I feel like for us, like, we are all those who's in one, and you need every part of you intentionally speaking to God for him to hear you.
Right.
Not that he can't if you don't, but it's for your benefit that you do, right?
Or to draw down the kinds of powers from heaven that you're probably expecting to draw down with prayer. So
exactly.
It's not that God can't hear you as much as it's that he can only bless you according to your faith. And so if you are just going through the motions, you might as well just start manifesting like when everybody else does, they're just like, oh, let me just manifest, and they just start thinking like boat. I want a boat, and they're like, if I just send those vibes into the ether, a boat will come into my life. Ooh, where it's no. Have a conversation with God is very different than just the idea. Elder Christofferson said this once, the idea of the cosmic vending machine that a lot of people have, where it's just like, oh, E7 is the boat, just punch E7, and that's manifesting, and that is imposing your will on God. Where prayer, what it actually is aligning your will to God's. And so the conversation that you have with him, it pre-requires that you have a broken heart and a contrite spirit. So you should be aware of where your heart and your mind is at when you do pray, if you are expecting to have a meaningful conversation with God, a meaningful communication with him. You should have those prerequisites in place, and then you can feel God, well, you can feel direction and personal revelation pouring into your life as you have that open heart and that open mind. But if your mind is closed and it's completely closed off and it's just saying, give me that, give me this, give me that. I don't know. You've had a lot of toddlers in your life. How do you respond as a parent when your toddler comes up to you and says, give me that cookie? I want to do this, or I want to do that. What goes through your mind as a father when that happens?
Yeah, well, I had that happen the other day. That one of my boys came up and he said he wanted a new bike. I said, okay, well, how are you going to get a new bike? And he said, I don't know, just give me it. I'm like, well, bikes cost money. He said, okay, well, give me the money. I'm like, no, you got to earn the money. I don't have any money. I'm broke. You got to get your own money. I'm too busy feeding you. He's like, well, how do I get money? Well, you go shovel driveways. I'm like, okay. And then at that point, he had a plan for what he needed to do. I feel like we need to approach prayer in the same way, is that when we pray, we need to have a mental idea of what we should expect from God. Like, what are we actually asking for? So when I ask for patience, what does that actually mean? Do I magically bestow the bottomless well of patience inside me and I'm just a different person now? Or when I go into the next room in 5 minutes with all the crazy kids, I'm going to be kind in my words, and I'm going to take a deep breath before I speak so I don't lose my temper. Mentally map out how you would approach this with God's power behind you, and then act on that. That's how you take prayer and you activate it and you draw down those powers from heaven.
That's how you put faith in your prayer, because faith in your prayer isn't just pre-prayer, it's also post-prayer. So I think that's a great point, where it's like, if you are praying with faith, it means that whatever answer you get, you're going to act on it. So if you pray and you're like, how can I have patience with my children? And you feel like, take that deep breath, don't react, be proactive there. And then you're like, okay, all right, here we go. And then you go and you take that deep breath. That's showing faith in that answer that you received. And so that's another way of showing faith in the prayer. That's a great call out.
Absolutely. I feel like the prayers that I pray that operate within the reality that I am in terms of my expectations are almost always answered. So like when I need more money, right? When times are tough, you're praying for financial solutions. You shouldn't pray for just more money to pop out of nowhere. You should pray for the opportunity to earn more money. And that's a hard thing to pray for, because that means more work, right? That means I have to work more. But when you shift your adjustment to that and say, oh, this is what I actually need, is the energy to work harder and longer so I can provide for my family, rather than I need dollars in my bank account, then you can actually change your entire perspective and be ready for when that work comes. Instead of cursing him for being too busy, you actually see it as a blessing.
So it actually changes your heart and your very nature. Well, I think that's a pretty good place to wrap up for the week. We're running out of time. So I'm Hayden Holm. This is Tanner, and we are Salty Saints. We'll see you next time.